Hey everyone, it's Ian. I'm up here at the shop again, aka Barton Motorsports. I'm up here with the car finally torn down and ready to start the turbo kit install. I just wanted to do a quick overview of everything that's been done so far. Haven't been able to touch it in a couple of weeks, but I'm back up here. 2 weeks ago I came up and started tearing the car down, did a clutch job start to finish, put in an ACT full face street clutch with a big high capacity pressure plate. So it'll support 370 foot-pounds, I believe, more than enough for this turbo build. But just want to jump right into everything that you'll obviously need to do before starting your turbo kit install. Obviously take the bumper off, the crash beam off. You're going to need to remove the factory header, factory NA header, get that off out of the way. Mine's already off and sold actually. Your oil cooler, get that out of the way because you're going to need to redo the lines for that and maybe put it somewhere else. Intake, obviously that's going to come off. I'm going to take the intake manifold off at some point in order to, because I'm upgrading the injectors anyways. I'm going to need to take the stock injectors out and put in the ID 1050X injectors, which are much higher flow than stock, and they will support that E85 fuel delivery at higher boost levels. It just uses a lot more fuel. There's a pump that's going to support that at the back in the tank. It's the full-blown Walbro 485 pump kit. But again, I'm going to take the manifold off in order to clamp a couple of evap solenoid lines that need to be clamped. They'll pop off if you don't. Also to get a more clean air oil separator installed. The Velox AOS will go right up in there. Already took the other one off, and you see the PCV hose kind of hanging out there. But moving right along, obviously you're going to be tearing all this stuff down and taking it off, like I said, when you do your turbo kit install anyways. But I'm going to actually start this from the bottom up. There is no right or wrong, but it's probably going to be the most conventional way to do it, meaning take the oil pan off, put the new oil pan on, seal that up, and then put the manifold on, build your way up. So compressor housing and the exhaust turbine, put that on, the whole turbo basically, downpipe everything leading down to the exhaust. Make sure all the hot parts fit, and then proceed with installing the charge piping up front. So going to do that pretty methodically, try to document all this stuff along the way, at least not every turn of every wrench, but just kind of give you guys status updates along the way and let you know if there's any particular methods or issues that I ran into to do this stuff. But I'll just move right along. Just want to show you guys the interior real quick. So, got the Brom Venom seats installed along with the 5-point harnesses. I wanted to show you both setups, the street and track setups. Right now it's the track setup. The 5-point harnesses are wrapped according to Schrott's directions around the back of my harness bar, just like my old Schrott harnesses were. It's hard to see, but they're right. And so you've got the seat belt receptacle here and that sub belt. I want to kind of explain to you guys what I did with the sub belt. So the planted seat brackets that I ordered, I needed to drill the front of them in order to accept the sub belt. The Brom harnesses come with big grade 8, beefy grade 8 little eye bolts for each one of the clip-in harnesses, and kind of want to show you guys best I can up underneath here. Hopefully you can see that. That is the setup for the sub belt. It's very secure, as secure as you can possibly get without welding a box to the floor. But this is not a race car, not going wheel to wheel with it, but it's plenty good for HPDE use, and it's very secure on there. Grade 8 hardware and stuff, so not too worried about it. But just want to show you guys in case you ever install these seats and you're wondering, where the hell do I mount this sub belt? So that's how I did it. Hopefully you'll be able to see that. Anything else over here? So we've got IRP short shifter installed. You should be able to see that. It's like a big, awesome, it's not a sequential, but it feels like a bolt action rifle. It's very solid. 60% shorter throws than stock. It feels amazing. But moving right along, I wanted to show you guys real quick. Kind of went overkill on the weight reduction. But all this crap I don't need any more. So I took it out. All the stuff behind the front, front seats, took the rear seats out, seat backs out, and pretty much left only everything that's completely necessary. So it should be significantly lighter. I haven't never got the car on scales, but I would like to eventually, and see what it weighs. I'm gonna guess somewhere close to 2,600 if I'm lucky. Should feel really good once it's corner balanced and dialed in on the track. But moving along, the passenger side is like the street setup. So I unclipped the harnesses. You should be able to see a little bit better. The Schroet clip-in harness adapters. There you go. Schroet clip-in harness adapters. They're sandwiched in between that stock seatbelt bracket and the floor where the harness bar clips in. Doesn't clip in, it bolts in, sorry. So you can unclip those very easily and run the stock seatbelt very easily. So it clips in just as you would. And so you unclip, hopefully that's not too hard to see, down in there from the planted seat bracket seatbelt receptacle. So that's in there. You can run both stock seat belts and the harnesses. You just clip those lap belts in and out, and when you're ready to go back to your stock 3-point, you can do that. So it's not so cumbersome every single day running the 5 points. But so far so good. The seats feel really nice. They feel just as supportive as stock. They got bigger bolsters, which is what I was after. Still reclinable for all shapes and sizes of people. So that's what I wanted. Just a nice basic upgrade from stock, and that red stitching matches the rest of the interior perfectly. It's kind of hard to see, but it's up in there, that red stitching. But that's it for now. Alright, quick shot underneath the car before I get started. Obviously the NA header is removed. You'll need to remove that, as well as the under tray, the skid plate, before you even do that. So get that all off. Expose the oil pan. You're going to want to get all this stuff off to the cover for the transmission tunnel. Just get everything off and out of the way before you start doing this. Here's the oil pan. You're going to take off all these bolts. You're going to have to pry it off. It is stuck on there with some good sealant, and you're going to have to pry it off. Be patient. Don't force it, because you will bend it. If you need to reuse this and weld your own fitting on there, you definitely don't want to bend it. So just be careful. But just want to get a shot up underneath the car before I get started. Obviously everything is pretty much out of the way and ready to, like I said, drop the oil pan, reinstall that, reseal that, and go forward with the manifold install. Alright. Okay, the oil pan is now off. It requires some prying. See the large pry bar right there. When you get all the bolts off, focus up here. You get all the bolts off, you're going to need to pry this sucker off. It's got some sealant on it to keep it from leaking. It's not going to fall as soon as you take all the bolts out. You're going to have to pry it. This is a good corner. Just do your best to not score the block as much as possible. So pry down instead of up against the surface of the block. And then just be patient. It's not going to fall on your head. You just loosen it up on one corner. You're going to have to bend this thing. So look at how much I bent it right here. You can see it just bent a corner and then started working with it until it finally gave up. When it finally did give up, it came straight down. Let me focus down here. It came straight down, and there was some oil in it, of course, so be prepared for that. Don't just turn it upside down as soon as you get it. Bring it down towards you, and then drain the rest of the oil that's in there. Also, before I forget, there's 2 rubber seals on here that you're going to need to take off and put on your new pan. This one here and this one here. So remember to replace those. Remember the orientation of those. There's a little mark here that you should probably see as well. Put those on your new oil pan if you get a new one. As you can see, you're going to have to bend it, so I highly, highly, highly recommend getting a new oil pan from JDL with a fitting already welded on there. You're going to have to bend yours back flat and hope that it seals once you put it back on. So it's cheap insurance to go ahead and get the one that's pre-welded by JDL. It's a factory pan that they weld the new fitting on. Also, it's a good time to put a Fumoto drain valve on your oil pan. It makes oil changes so much easier. You just pull the valve and the oil drains, you push it back, and you can actually take samples before you even change it fully and send those into Blackstone Labs for analysis, which is awesome. But yeah, let me focus back up here. Hang on just a second. All right, so I'm focused back up on the block. Here we go. And you can kind of see, hopefully, yeah, hello, rod bearings and connecting rods. Please don't fail or let go. So yeah, that's everything up in there. That's the crankcase. And we got a factory baffle plate up in there to keep the oil from sloshing. But yep, this is also to demonstrate how you're going to need to clean all the rest of the old gasket off. So I haven't done that yet, but you're going to use a razor blade and clean all that off before you reseal it. And I have Permatex sealant for that. But yeah, just wanted to show you what it looks like with the oil pan off, how to get it off, and give you my recommendations with regards to that. So that's it. Hey, okay, so I have cleaned almost all of the old gasket off of the block mating surface. Just want to show you guys real quick how I did that. Scotch-Brite heavy duty pad, it's sitting right here. It's already been used, but you're going to need one of these, and you're going to need to wear safety goggles on your eyes, because all that crap, including the crap off of this Scotch-Brite pad, is going to fall right into your eyes when you're doing this, so just make sure you're wearing those. But yeah, you're going to want to you're not going to want to use a screwdriver. You could use a scraping tool for the big pieces, but you got to be careful. This is where I pried it and got a little bit of a booger on the mating surface, but that'll be fine. But you're going to make sure that this is clean all the way around for when you put your new sealant on your new oil pan. Just make sure it's going to take you probably 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes. You're going to need to use a lot of elbow grease just to scrape all that crap off with your Scotch-Brite pad. But don't use anything abrasive. Don't use a screwdriver, again, because that's just going to score it up and make it all nasty and probably ruin your seal. But yeah, this is pretty much ready to go back on. I'm going to get the JDL pan out, put the sealant on there, get everything, all the bolts finger tight first. Probably let it sit for a few hours and then torque them down in a across fashion, all the way across. You want to make sure you do that so that it gets again a good seal, and you don't mush all that sealant right away. You're going to want to let it set a little bit and then torque it down. All right, see you later. Hey, back here with the new oil pan. Remember what I said about the seals, taking them off of the old pan? JDL actually included new seals, so you don't need to do that. So thanks, JDL, but you need to put these back on. You don't have to really line up those paint marks, but press them down with the lip side up, lip side facing up. So here's the other one, lip side facing up, and put those on each of those little oil drains before you do this. Just wanted to show you, Permatex Ultra Black is what I'm going to use. It's a gasket maker with maximum oil resistance, so that's what you want. What you're going to want to do with this is not only go around the perimeter of the oil pan, but also make little circles around each of the bolt holes, so you get a nice seal around each bolt, all the way around, so you get a nice seal. Get those bolts finger tight first, like I said, and then torque them after it has a little while to set. The torque is very low. I need to look that up to make sure. I think it's like 6 or 8 or 10 foot-pounds tops. But yeah, just want to show you guys that and remind you that these seals go back on to the drain before you put it on. All right. The new oil pan is on. I let it sit with all the bolts finger tight for 1 hour per the Permatex instructions, and then just torqued them all to spec. I'll show you that spec in a second, but You can see how the sealant has come out just a little bit. That's what you want. You need to wait 24 hours before putting fluids inside. But everything's on there. The new Fumoto valve is on there. And you can see the turbo oil drain right here. Just a quick shot of that. Definitely not putting oil in it for at least 24 hours while this cures. But yeah, you want to make sure that you do this right, and I'll show you real quick. Over here, this is the order that you do it, the bolt order, and the torque spec. 57 inch-pounds. I'll zoom out so you can pause it right here if you want. Alright. So the turbo manifold is now on. Grimspeed multi-layer steel gaskets are on there. Ultra torque to spec. It's actually easier to install versus the NA header because you can get 5 of 6 bolts, 5 of 6 nuts rather, on those studs. This one on the inside of the driver's side needed a crow's foot adapter, but all the other ones went on pretty easily. Let me try to zoom out here. You can see how it snakes around. You got your wastegate port here, and clearance, plenty of it against the slim fan shroud that I have. So I'll take a look at it from above now. Okay, so I have the hot parts all installed now. Turbine housings mounted, those are torqued with the gasket. The downpipe bolts aren't torqued, but they are in loosely finger tight. Both of the O2 sensors are in and secured, plugged in. Just for reference, the primary O2 sensor is here. That's the gray plug. Secondary is the black plug. So when you're doing this, primary, secondary, the wiring and the clips have corresponding colors, so you'll be able to see that. Alright, so I've got the intake manifold off. Engine bay is looking a little strange because the intake manifold's off. It was a pain in the ass to take off. Mainly all this rear wiring getting in the way. There's 3 bolts per side. Once you get it loose, you'll have to disconnect the fuel rail here, fuel rail over here, this guy. You have to disconnect this bracket, this fuel line here. You should have the same one if you don't have a flex fuel kit. And then you should be able to wriggle it out. After also, forgot disconnecting this evap solenoid connector and pulling this evap hose off of the bottom of it. It's easier to get at those when you disconnect or take the throttle body off first. But you should be able to wrestle that thing out, and once it's out, obviously you're going to want to immediately put some rags or shop towels down into the intake ports in the block so nothing gets down in there or drops down in there. I just took some, I turned on the air compressor and used it to blast all the sand out of the nooks and crannies of the top of the block. There was a bunch of it, and so I just decided to try to get as much of it out because it's kind of gross up under here. And just make sure that you got those intake ports really good and stuffed before you do it. But I went ahead and took it off because I need to put on new injectors, and I need to clamp. Everybody's going to need to clamp their evap solenoid hose. So put a clamp here on this one, and where it connects under the intake manifold, I'll show you in a second, and the little crossover hose where it also connects. So this is the intake manifold, this is the bottom of it, and this is the evap solenoid that I'm talking about. This is the crossover pipe. It's going to need a clamp here, and you're also going to need a clamp there, and you won't need one on the other end, I don't believe, but if you do, it's easier to get at. But here's that connector. It's under the back. That connector for the evap solenoid. You'll disconnect that. But yeah, you'll disconnect the fuel rails at both sides. And then once that's off, you'll be able to, if you're doing injectors, you'll be able to, you'll be able to get at these bolts right here. You'll be able to get at these bolts and pull the fuel rails off. Like I said, I went in and took it all off. I did the deed because I wanted to get under there and make sure that I'd clamp those hoses right, and now I have easier access to switch out these injectors on the fuel rails. But yeah, I'll update this once I'm done doing the fuel injectors. Okay, I think I finally got the Velux air oil separator installed properly. So you can see the bracket down here. You might be able to see the little Fumoto drain valve on the bottom of it. But it simply mounts underneath the battery bracket and then ties into a little wiring bracket up here. But yeah, it's mounted, and the hoses that it comes with, I had enough hose to use combined with the hose that JDL provided. So this is one catch can that serves both ends of the engine. So you can see the fitting right down in here. That is the rear PCV. There's a new fitting in there that's basically wide open. So all the crankcase ventilation is going to come up into here. And then the other end, underneath the AC compressor, hard to see under there, but that's where that other one is. I can't even get an angle on that. But the vacuum are these two middle hoses. Two middle hoses are vacuum, and I had to go out and find a T-fitting at Home Depot, a 1/2-inch brass barbed on all ends T-fitting, in order to do the vacuum source off of the front of the turbo intake. So I have this plenty of hose length left to plug into the turbo intake in order to get proper vacuum on the AOS. So that's pretty much it. This is all going to be hidden underneath the intake manifold, hopefully. It should push down, and I should be able to reconnect everything. I disconnected. I had my NA intake pretty much set up to not run any coolant through it. I bypassed that original hose, but I'm going to run it back through again because with boost and in cold weather it might actually freeze it up. I don't know, but pulled that off, let a little bit of coolant come out, and just sopped it up with the towel, and that is going to be where the turbocharger gets its coolant feed. So it's going to go into the side of the throttle body, out that front throttle body port to the turbo, and then back there to drain the coolant from the turbocharger. But yeah, I am going to start on the injectors now. Alright, so I finally got the injectors installed after getting the AOS done. But the 1050X injector dynamics injectors are installed right now. In order to get them in, you basically remove the fuel rails. I just sat it in my lap with some shop towels, obviously, to catch all the excess fuel. These two bolts, the injector rails will come right out, and then you'll basically pop the new injectors in. I got the plug-and-play harnesses for these, so it's a little bit easier, so you don't have to repin them. But you do need to take out the, there's a rubber, thick black circular rubber O-ring that's down in the ports. They need to remove in order to install the IDs. Your injector may vary, especially if you're staying stock. You don't even need to do this, but yeah, I removed that. Capped the top here because we're going forced induction, so capping that, and only going to run the brake booster on this vacuum port. But I wanted to flip it upside down really quick and show you guys the evap. Whoa, okay, there we go. Evap solenoid stuff is all clamped. I pulled it off so that it can be reinstalled more easily, that second hose on the right. So it can be reinstalled more easily when I put this all back on. It was not fun taking it off, and it won't be fun putting it back on, but it's going to be done right, and I've cleaned all the surfaces, the mating surfaces on the block, so it should go down nice and clean and be leak-free, hopefully. But yeah, all that's done, and we'll wait to record some more footage once this is back on the car. Alright, so I wrestled the intake manifold back on with the new injectors in place. Everything actually went back together easier than it came off. Gravity helped, but everything is together, the injectors are on, the harnesses are connected. Everything's pretty much good to go and secured back together. Those evap clamps, solenoid clamps, have clamps on all 4 connections. The throttle body coolant is hooked back up. You can see that. That's hooked back up so I can use both of those hose barbs, that upper and lower one, to feed the turbocharger coolant. That's the shortest route to get coolant to the turbocharger. What else? Oh yeah, the VLOX AOS. That's all done. That's all routed neatly. The T-fitting is tucked underneath the intake manifold. You can't see it. I think it's pretty clean. Using these big ass hoses and routing them all underneath the intake manifold, and that T, you can't even see it, but it's under there. It's not being pinched or anything like that. You can also see I installed the 3-bar map sensor, put the nipple on this to close it off, and the brake booster is still going to run on vacuum. But all that vacuum, both of those vacuums and that T, comes out right here. So this will be trimmed and plugged into the turbocharger intake pipe in order to receive a vacuum pull and properly filter all those oil vapors. So what's next? So I'm probably going to work on the coolant lines. It's a little late, so I'm not thinking straight. So I'll just probably call it an early night after doing a couple more odds and ends and get started tomorrow. Alright, so I have the wastegate set up and ready to install. I put the 9.4 pound green spring in on its own. The instructions for doing so are very well written out in the Precision Wastegate manual, but you can see the chart here. The green spring for 9.4 psi is going to be what I run. I'm not going to run an electronic boost controller for now. I'm just going to run it on the wastegate, nice and simple setup. So in order to do that, I wanted to show you guys the top banjo bolt is vented to atmosphere. You're not going to hook that up to anything if you don't have a manual or electronic boost controller. And then the side port is where you're going to want to run the supplied hose in the JDL kit up to the boost source on the compressor housing of the turbocharger. So it should be plenty length of hose, but I wanted to kind of pick this up and come under the car with it and kind of show you guys what we're looking at. So I've got the recirculated kit, I've got the dump tube already installed, and I want to show you, you're going to want to orientate your wastegate port with the hose on it on the side. You're going to want to put it on the front side, so facing the front of the car, and you're going to want to install that cap on the back side. This is the cap right here where my thumb is. You're going to want to install that there in order to clear the front timing cover, and you'll see what I mean when I mock this up. Try to put it up here so you guys can see. So here it is, roughly mocked up, and you can see that if you put the banjo bolt on the back side, you're going to be touching the front timing cover, so you don't want that. You want it on the front, and you'll tighten those down once you get it all mocked up. Can't do this with two hands, but you can kind of see how the hose follows the side of that front piece of the frame. You're going to want to send that hose over towards the driver's side and up, kind of following where that coolant hose is. It's a big long length of turbo water hose going up. Come on, there you go. You can see that there, going straight up. That's where you're going to want it, away from the hot parts. Use zip ties if you can. Don't touch the fans or anything with it, but it's going to go straight up there. You can kind of see where the turbocharger oil feed line is and where the hot side is up there. But that's what you're going to want to do. Hopefully this demonstrates what's going on well enough. I'm gonna put the gaskets on and the bolts on now and tighten everything down. Alright, so fast forward a little bit, actually a lot of it. I actually stayed up pretty late last night and came back out here this afternoon and pretty much got the whole thing done, with the exception of a few things. But I just wanted to go over everything up top, and I'll go over everything underneath afterwards and kind of give you guys the best practices and some pointers that I learned. So first things first, you can see up here that the intercooler and the oil cooler are now done, as well as the crash beam is now mounted. Crash beam is just 4 bolts on either side, same factory mounting bolts, same factory mounting holes, no drilling required, but it does, have the bung for the tow hook. Hopefully that lines up correctly, but it should. But I mainly wanted to show you guys the oil cooler. I just finished that up. I reused the 13-row Mocal oil cooler core in my parent oil cooler kit. It was originally the NA kit that mounted it up front and center on the bottom of that tray, but I relocated it. I used some steel exhaust clamps to secure it very nicely to the crash beam, and I'll come up close so you can see. Put some padding underneath so it's not going to vibrate. It's very, very sturdy. It's not going to move around too much. And also secured some extra foam padding in between the intercooler. You may not be able to see it, but right there, so it's not going to vibrate. It's not going to chafe or scrape on the intercooler at all. But it's secure. And I had some lines sent to me by parents, some extra long ones, along with some fittings. I didn't use those, but I used the original fittings and the 90 degrees fittings on the lines that parents sent me, and so there's 90s on all in. But I'll come around and show you. You can see how they go right behind the intercooler. They're stacked one on top of the other. No sharp bends or anything, no kinks. Everything's really nice. Should work out pretty well. Should also clear. I'm going to drill and tap for my V-lock splitter right here and on the other side, more than likely. Gonna just have to mock that up and measure twice, drill once, kind of thing. So onward. The horn, relocated the second horn over here. Hopefully you can see that. The second horn's right here. Bolted that to the upper left mounting bolt spot for the crash beam. Tied all that crap under here, the wiring for it. I disconnected some of those connectors, but the factory temperature sensor, the outside air temperature sensor, is still right here, and it'll still get outside air to feed it. But both the factory horns are still there, and they will have all the room in the world to do their thing right here. So again, I want to show you up front first. I'll kind of zoom out. And intercooler, that fitted pretty well. Back there, way back there, there are a couple of bolts that come up through the tray with some spacers that you're going to install. It just has a little back lip on it, and it secures it to the bottom. Most importantly, up here is where I did a little custom modification to the upper intercooler support bracket. It originally was about this high, and it had a hole up here about where my finger is. I noticed that with that installed, with the bolt threaded through that upper hole where it was kind of pushing this tray. It was pushing this tray down. And when you have the bumper on, you want this tray to be nice and level. And so what I did was simply drill a couple of new holes, one below the other, and tested each one until I found that it was actually holding the intercooler up and allowing the lower tray to stay level. which is ideally what you want. You want it to stay level so the bumper goes on, and anything underneath the bumper like a splitter will stay on flat. But all these clamps, they went on really nicely. They're super high quality, big old gnarly clamps that have lots of clamping force on them. But you can see the cold side charge pipe coming out of the intercooler, all the clearance in the world, how it pancakes down and clears that upper radiator support really nicely. And the hot side charge pipe, along with the TurboSmart blow-off valve. I'll show you guys as best I can how I routed that TurboSmart blow-off valve line. But that V-band fitting comes right on here, it tightens right up right there, as well as these clamps for the intercooler on this side. But there's plenty of clearance under here. It can all wiggle around. No worry about anything chafing or being pinched up under here. Alright, so moving on, crown jewel, the turbocharger. So I clocked this thing about 4 times. I'm not sure if JDL are going to be clocking these when they get them into the shop before they send them out, but mine was drop shipped from Garrett, so it is going to need, mine was needed to be clocked. And so I had it off the car, on the car, off the car a few times, making sure everything was right with the turbine housing and the compressor housing. Made some marks to make sure that it was where I wanted it to feed this, charge pipe right here, this silicone coupler. And it's perfect now. It lines up, everything is on the outlet flange perfectly and clamped down. I also had to drill and tap, hopefully you can see that. I had to drill and tap my compressor housing for a boost source. Jesse sent me a drill bit and a tap for that, as well as that fitting that you see there on the compressor housing. Hopefully that's visible there. But that is coming off of the wastegate, and I'll show you that when I'm under the car. But back to the clocking. This is important. When you clock your turbocharger, I don't know if you're going to have a different method or different issue with a Precision Turbo or a Garrett Turbo or a Garrett GTX Gen 2, which is what I have. You are going to need to make sure that your oil feed fitting is within 15 degrees plus or minus, and it's more than likely going to be plus, of straight up and down, of vertical. This is important because you're going to need that in order to get the proper oil feed through the center housing rotating assembly and down to the bottom to the drain, all the way back down to the oil pan. If it is too offset, which it was originally, if it's too far over, you may smoke the turbo. You may put extra unwanted load on those bearings inside and literally smoke it and destroy the inside of it. So I reclocked mine. It's all the way up as far as it can possibly go, and I'll show you why. The drain fitting you may not be able to see from up here, but the drain fitting underneath is very, very close to the flange that mates the manifold to the turbine housing, that square or rectangular flange. And so I had to pull it back, clock it back this way as much as I could in order to get it within Garrett's specification, which is plus or minus 15 degrees. Now I didn't get a protractor out, but this is straight up and down. It should be within spec. So I'm not too worried about it anymore. But the water lines, they all came in nicely. Water lines are being fed off of the throttle body. So hopefully you can see under there. The factory throttle body coolant feed is right here. And it makes a right hand, a 90-degree. There we go. 90-degree that feeds the turbocharger. So both of those are coming over here. This is the feed line, and this is the return line going back under that big water fitting under the block. MAF sensor wiring is just cradling. It's not being pulled at all. It's not being pulled at all by the coolant hoses, so there's no worries there. This isn't chafing on the oil feed line either. So everything came together with regards to the coolant and oil feeds pretty nicely, but you just got to make sure that you clock that turbocharger as far up or vertical with that oil feed as possible. Other turbochargers like the Precision, you may be able to clock that thing much more easily straight up. Alright, so what have I not covered? Air filter, no issues fitting the air filter over here. Come on, turn. No issues fitting the air filter over here. No interference either. That all came together really nicely. The vacuum port, that's going to pull vacuum all the way underneath the intake manifold. It's not a port, it's a hose. All the way underneath the intake manifold to that T-fitting that I have. The T-fitting that I have underneath here that feeds the air oil separator over here. Air oil separator, the outside hoses, the one on the far left and far right. Far left is for the rear PCV. Far right is for the front crankcase vent up underneath the AC compressor. So that's all set up. You have to block off that left port on the intake manifold for your Velox AOS. I think I already went over all the injectors. Those are all in. The plug and play harnesses are plugged in on both sides. No issues fitting those. Hopefully they work well. They're the ID Injector Dynamics 1050X injectors. What else have I not covered? So oil cooler lines at the sandwich plate. So it was tight originally, very tight, and I reused, like I said, 2 90-degree fittings and got a couple other 90-degree fittings from Perrin and cut the lines, used the Oetiker clamps like they use, and clamped them down on either end. Hopefully you can see that there is plenty of clearance there. Not much, but plenty, enough. I had to actually shave down my oil filler cap. I shaved down this end that sticks out on the factory cap, and then I shaved all the way down around with a bench grinder around the outside of it. Didn't booger up the seal or anything, but had to shave it down so I could actually spin it off and leave this exactly where it is so I could spin it off and fill the oil. And it's not moving. I'm going to leave it right here. It's perfectly clear. Those lines go straight down. They're not touching anything. And again, I'll bring it down right under here so you can see the oil cooler lines. They come straight down from up top, not rubbing on anything sharp, straight down behind the intercooler. I'm very happy with that, how that came out. So back up top, what have I not shown you? Blow-off valve line. So the blow-off valve line starts under here. I'll wiggle it so you can see. There we go, right here. And it goes straight back, all the way back. Still wiggling it. It's following the frame rail. It's following the air conditioning lines. See me wiggling it? Continuing to wiggle it, and it goes all the way back along the frame rail. I tucked it actually behind the fuel lines, and it comes around those fuel lines right over behind the brake booster. So the T-fitting is what JDL includes. Here we go. T-fitting is what JDL includes for your blow-off valve. You're going to need to install that T-fitting somewhere in between the intake manifold where the brake booster line comes in. So right here where that comes in, follow that hopefully down and up, and this is where it comes around. Now with this, you got to feel it. You got to pinch this hose until you feel this right here. That is a check valve. It won't let boost into the brake booster hose. So you got to make sure that your T-fitting, when you cut it, is below this. And so a few inches below that, where you can see it bulge, you can see it bulging where that check valve is, and you're going to want to cut it below that a few inches so you can get that T-fitting in there, clamp it down with the supplied hose clamps on all three ends, and again to your blow-off valve feed line. So I think I have covered nearly everything up here that I can show you. I have the wastegate line coming off the wastegate under here. It's much easier to see from below, which I'll show you from below. But yeah, that's pretty much it up top. I mean, everything came together pretty nicely. Once I had the turbocharger on and clocked correctly, last night I was just killing it. I was, I had all the intercooler, charge piping, all that stuff on and clamped down really quickly, or what felt like quickly. It just all came together very intuitively. I don't think there's any guessing to be done when you do this yourself. What goes where. It's very obvious. What goes where with regards to the charge piping, the intercooler, and all that stuff. All those bags were labeled. Every single piece of hardware was in there. Nothing was missing. Didn't have to do really any custom modification besides this little guy right here, which was not a big deal. Just a couple of holes with a drill, and then ground it down on the bench grinder. Excuse me. What else? Okay, I think I'm ready to put the car in the air and show you guys what's underneath, and just kind of go through some of the best practices there, because I definitely learned some lessons on the best way to install all these hot parts. So I'll put the car up and then turn it back on for recording. Okay, we're back underneath the car. You guys have already seen the charge piping, but this is all secure now. So the wastegate dump tube is all secure going out of the down pipe. Still need that front pipe. I'm about to have that sent to me from JDL. I'm getting their Frover pipe, the one with the V-band on it. So I'll need that before the car can run. But underneath here, the turbocharger oil drain fitting on the oil pan is on. That came together really nicely. I'll zoom up, but it's floating. The line is floating up above the main radiator hose and below another coolant hose, and I'll zoom in on that if I can scooch up and get this thing to follow me. Okay, so turbocharger oil drain, it's up and under there, and it follows, doesn't touch anything, comes around, gets away from the hose, the drive belt, comes up underneath the front timing cover. Come on, turn. I need this thing, this gimbal to turn. Okay, and up underneath the block to the oil pan. So back up. Hopefully you can see that pretty well. That came together really nicely. That's a 10AN fitting up there, and I was able to tighten it as you see it right there. It's pretty tight, but I was able to get this big old open-ended wrench, I think it's like a 21 or 22 millimeter on there, and tighten it from below, even with the turbine flange very close. So moving on to the wastegate. So the big lesson learned here with the wastegate. It is best practice to install the wastegate onto the manifold before installing the manifold on the car. If you have a recirculated dump, you're going to want to also install that dump tube before installing the manifold to the car. It is a huge pain in the ass. Look at how tight it is up here with the manifold on. I'm trying to tighten these 6mm Allen bolts. I was able to do it and get them tight, but I had to actually cut a 6mm Allen wrench down to a little stub in order to get it up in there and turn these bolts. All 4 of them, not all 4 of them, probably 3 out of 4 of them were a pain in the ass. That bottom one wasn't too bad, but this one where it gets really tight on the bottom right, that was a pain in the ass. That one up there was a pain in the ass, and that one over there is a pain in the ass. But just heed my advice when you install this kit. If you have this UEL V2 manifold with this precision wastegate, and if it's not a V-band, if it's this 2-bolt one, you are definitely going to want to install it to the manifold with your dump tube, especially if you have recirculated, before installing the manifold to the car. You can see the wastegate line coming off the side. That's what goes all the way up, and I hopefully can follow this thing around. It is zip tied. Turn. Okay, alright. It's zip tied to the front frame rail up underneath, and it goes all the way around. You can see it up under the radiator hose. That's it. And it goes up. It goes up behind those oil cooler lines. Come on, turn. Behind those oil cooler lines and up to the compressor housing. You can see it, that yellow fitting there, the yellow and gold, the Teflon on it. That's the compressor housing boost source. And so it's run, so it's going to be on wastegate only. There's no electronic boost control solenoid on this car yet. So when you install it this way, you leave the top banjo bolt vented to atmospheres. You're not going to mess with that. I already went over in that first video talking about the wastegate that you're going to want to put the outlet banjo on the front side, and then that just that cap bolt on the back side. Anything else under here? The oil pan is sealed up nicely. It's had well over 24 hours. There's no oil in it yet, but the Fumoto valve is on there. That makes it real easy to drain when I need to. What else we got? There's just all kinds of clearance under here. Jesse tested this with the factory skid plate. It all fits underneath there. There's no contact there. But yeah, just again, be patient with this. So once you install the manifold with the wastegate on and your dump tube, if you have a recirculated kit like this one, then you're going to want to probably drop, with a friend helping you out, you're going to want to drop the downpipe from up top down, snake it down. You might need to, if I can show you this, you might need to remove that cam solenoid right there when you do it, just to make room. There's no contact when it's installed, but you might need to remove it just to make room while you're doing this. And then once it's down here, then you pull it into the dump tube and secure it. And once that's secured, you can go ahead and bolt the 4 bolts onto the turbine housing. But like I said, I'm pretty much done with this right now. Oil cooler is all done. I am not ready to run it because I still need a front pipe and an over pipe. So from here over the front subframe all the way back.